Okay, I think Anton, let's go ahead and get started and we'll let folks join as we go here. But welcome. Those of you on the call, thank you for joining. Just as a heads up, we got a number of messages from colleagues that said they couldn't join today. So the webinar recording will be on YouTube. So feel free to share around with your colleagues. I'm just gonna pull up a couple of slides for our intros and then we'll get going here. Okay, again, thank you guys for coming and thank you, Anton, for joining us today. I'm Birju. I'm gonna kind of lead the conversation with Anton today. I think many of you already know me, but I'm one of the co-founders of Rec Technologies, and we're a company on a very simple, inspired mission, which is make all of the amazing thing that Parks and Recreation departments do feel the way that all of the apps that we love in our lives do when people interact with them digitally. And so we're really, really inspired to just like build that amazing customer experience. Our team is a number of folks that have spent a ton of time at places like Google and Uber and Amazon. And what we inspire ourselves to do is say like, hey, how can jumping on your local court feel a lot like modern technology? And how can booking a program and finding something to do with your family or for your kids feel as simple for residents to get involved with and as simple and powerful for staff to provide those experiences with technology that just makes sense. And so I've spent my last 3 years really thinking about, hey, how can Parks and Rec departments find a technology partner that is more powerful to them? And in doing that, I've gotten to meet hundreds of people in Parks and Recreation and learn how things work and where opportunities lie, and have picked the brains of hundreds of people in industry, whether that's technology or marketing, or just other really awesome and innovative companies in the public sphere, to have conversations about what's going on in industry and how could they be applied to the world of Parks and Recreation. And for those of you that have joined more than one webinar that we run, we like to bring people from industry in to have a conversation that's in their wheelhouse, but applied to Parks and Rec. And today, we're talking about world-class marketing and brand. And this little graphic kind of illustrates just like the light premise of this conversation, which is, when you think about marketing and brand, a lot of that is centered around this activity guide in Parks and Rec world, and that activity guide plays a really powerful role. But as the world is evolving to Google search and personalization and very dynamic and one-off marketing, how can everyone at Parks and Recreation take some of the learnings from all the people that do this really well and continue to do that? And so that being said, I'd love to introduce today's speaker. Anton, welcome. I'll let you take it away. Tell us about yourself.
Hi, everyone. And Biju, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. My background is advertising, originally working at agencies on some amazing brands, amazing companies, Microsoft, Levi's, Pets.com, which I'll talk about in a second. I was the first marketing hire at Nest, the thermostat company, and now work actually with one of the founders of Nest, Tony Fidel at Build. We invest in startups, and we advise and mentor the founders along the way. We'll talk today about branding and marketing. One of the most important things I've learned throughout my career is that you can't have great marketing and great success without a great product or business model. And Pets.com is the highlight there, because you really would be hard pressed to find a better marketing campaign, but obviously we know what happened to them. And so, great marketing won't save you from a bad business model. I've worked on campaigns that were in the tens of millions in terms of dollars spent on ad campaigns globally. And, Windows Vista was not a success. And so you need a great product to have the thing be a success. And I think Nest is a great example of having a great product that allowed us to build great marketing and a great brand around it. And that turned out to be successful because you had the full package. You had the product, the experience with that product, and then great marketing and branding as well. So that's my background and some of the highlights of my experience.
Sweet. And I think, Anton, I think the conversation we were having, the exciting thing about this in Parks and Rec world is the great product is almost always there. And so it's really exciting to talk about, okay, like when you know that, like how do we take this thing to market?
Yeah, that's the wonderful thing with the Parks and Rec. It's like you have the most amazing product available, which is in many cases, I think in most cases, the outdoors, and if you have indoor spaces, you're offering people a place to play. And I mean, what better product is there? And the branding or the marketing of that should be fairly straightforward and easy. Yeah.
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 Cool. And so like just to like frame the conversation for today, I think a couple core things. And this is allowing me to have a little bit of permission, Anton, if the conversation's great, but we're kind of veering away from Parks and Rec, I might pull you back into the world of Parks and Recreation.
Yeah, please.
You might hear me cut things off. But what we'll do is like I would love to like learn a bit about your learnings from industry, and then the second half of the conversation will be let's like more directly apply them to things that Parks and Rec departments could be doing tomorrow. And so with that, I'm just gonna drop off the slides and we'll kind of just do this so people can see your face. We'll go with that. And yeah, I guess like question one, like tell me about the question was how has kind of like consumer and consumer marketing evolved over the course of your career?
Yeah, I like breaking those two apart. How have consumers evolved and how has marketing evolved? And one as I was thinking about this question, one thing that came to mind was when you imagine New York City, Times Square, you are surrounded by flashing lights, huge billboards, tons of noise. Everything is trying to grab your attention, and you're left with not much information because there's just so much stuff coming at you. Whereas imagine you're walking through your local park with your dog and you're daydreaming, you're watching, the path in front and the trees go by, and then you see, a tennis court and a little sign. And what do? Your eyes are drawn to that little sign, right? And so when you have these two different worlds, one is like marketing blasting at you, millions of dollars spent, and the takeaway is really it's just noise. Like it's just too much for me to concentrate my attention on any specific thing. Whereas if I'm in the park and I see this little sign printed, it's not a screen, right? And I actually read it and soak up the information. The consumer hasn't changed. And if you think about Times Square, the 70s, it's the same thing. It's like 50 years ago, the experience I had at Times Square is the same as the one today. And the bottom line is consumers haven't evolved. Like we're still humans. We're still incapable in a way of parsing out tons of information when it's thrown at us at the same time. Whereas if we have one thing to pay attention to. We're actually drawn to it because our mind actually wants to soak up information and process it. And so the fundamental human nature hasn't changed. Marketing has changed because the tools have changed. And frankly, the single most important marketing tool is your phone. I mean, that's the one thing that has changed, compared to, billboards, compared to television, compared to radio. That's the one additional device we now have, which we're actually, even in the context of a Times Square, we pull out our phone and yeah, we pay attention to our phone, even though people have spent millions, if not billions, on this flashing canvas around us. So then within that phone, I think there are two main platforms that really have changed marketing. And one is social media, because more so than, an online newspaper or even YouTube, in a way, social media is personal, right? It feels personal. It's your friends, it's the topics that you care about. And so it's relevant to you and it's interesting and it's kind of like newsy. You get your dopamine hit, and you're drawn to it. So that's one thing. The other thing, is the world of apps, right? Because it's utility. Like you get value from that app, whether it's taking an Uber, right? And getting from A to B via the app, getting or booking a court, right? For on rec, to play a game of tennis. So I think social media and apps are really the one thing related to your phone that has really changed the game in terms of marketing. That's what I'd say is a highlight.
Yeah, interesting. And so like when you like think about the companies as you've like evolved in your career, and you've worked with them in marketing, um, what changed? Like what changed in terms of like the way you implemented marketing campaigns pre-social media and pre-apps? And then I guess if you were going to start a marketing team or an initiative from scratch now, like what's happening?
Yeah, so I think the media, right, has changed, right? So where in the past we've invested heavily in big awareness kind of vehicles like television or billboards, back in the day, print. Um, you used to pay a lot of money for these oversized, literally large impressions for billboards or a 30-second spot, preferably in the Super Bowl. And you'd try to break through you'd say break through the clutter, right? And whether it's the clutter of television, whether it's the clutter of your urban landscape, when you're talking about billboards, you try and make that impression. And I think I, as a marketer, think about things differently now. I think more about the fact that I want to be part of your, I hate to say like media consumption, but part of your daily habits. And a lot of it is on your phone, right? So I try and, like, for example, Instagram. When I'm on Instagram, I have certain interests. I like surfing, I like 911s, I like old motorcycles. And what do I see on Instagram? All the things I love, right? And so so the advertisers that know these things that I love and give me vintage car posters, right, or surfboard fins or whatever, like they pop up an ad in front of my journey on Instagram, and I'm surprised how many of these ads I click on. Like it's unheard of. Like in the olden days, pre Instagram and so forth, to click on an ad was like, your click-through rates would be like 0.01%. And I'm sure that's higher now in my Instagram feed.
Um, that's really fascinating. And it actually, I know we said we would get to the applying to recreation, but I think there might be a fun little like brainstorm here. Like that, like for a Parks and Recreation department, once armed with that fact, like social media should be so powerful. Like, where does your head go in terms of like, how do you give people like hits of personalized content? Like how does a Parks and Rec department insert themselves into the media consumption of a human?
Well, you can post, you can have a social media account, obviously. I mean, this goes without saying, you should have the social, if you're interested in getting people, to play in your courts and play in your park spaces, have a social media account, where you can show them what's available on offer, and the beauty of it all and so forth. Um, you can pay, to have ads run there. I don't think you need it, because I think people, again, you have this amazing product, so just bring it to life on social, right? Um, so I think there's an easy and clear, and hopefully you're doing it already, path to social. I think the other thing is, and this is the app world, is the utility that you get through an app to know what you can access and when you can access it, in the Parks and Rec space, or what you have on offer. And I think in the app space, you have this opportunity to actually notify people of events, of things that are available, of new courts that opened up. This morning, before we got on this call, we talked about a turkey trot that's happening Thanksgiving, a 5K run that one of the great Parks and Rec folks are putting together, and they're notifying their local folks through the app. And I think that's marketing in a way, but it's more of a utility in that you're letting people know, hey, come out and have fun. Like, what I mean, that's not come out and buy this thing XYZ. It's no, come out and have fun with some other folks, socialize, and do something healthy.
Interesting. Do you have like any examples in your career of like using your privilege as a utility to like drive um marketing or like drive adoption of something?
What do you mean as utility? Like the
I
Nest app for the thermostat, or an Uber app for the?
Yeah, I think what we were getting at is like what was really interesting to me is like a Parks and Recreation department, because they're offering such great services, can
Yeah.
simply notify people of that service as a benefit. And by doing so, they are essentially doing marketing. And um, what's interesting here is like I feel like an opportunity is the ability to like provide this level of like personalization of
Yeah.
notification and things in a way that get more people to do the thing.
I think one thing, that just to get it out of the way, I think marketing gets a bad rap, and I think that it has something like 1950s legacy, right? So marketing was originally designed to sell you something you don't need, right? Like let's show this beautiful car with chrome highlights, and suggest to you that you'll have a happier family when you buy this Cadillac, right? And I think that's what we still understand as marketing, right? It's buy this even though you don't need it, but you'll love it, and so forth. And I think that's changed, not across the board, but for products and experience like Parks and Rec, marketing is more so a matter of getting the word out for truly good things. And frankly, it's not like you're selling court time. I don't believe, maybe with an instructor, right? But what you're really doing is inviting people out, letting them know that good things are available and good things are happening. And so, I think it's not marketing of the 1950s kind. It's more marketing of what used to be like a newspaper or something, where you'd find your local events, and it just happens to be now on an app on your phone.
Cool, interesting. And I just want to flow through these kind of like intro questions about like about your background here. Like, I guess the next one is like, um, what is brand? And do people need it?
Yeah. I mean, again, the 1950s reference is apt because that's probably where that name came from. Well, I think it comes from branding your cattle and making sure that people know it's your cow. But it has again these kind of connotations of a brand being a logo, right? A brand being, an ad campaign, right? Or a tagline, right? And I've learned, I mean, that's certainly what I thought when I got into advertising. But what I've learned over time, and especially at Nest, was that the brand is really everything in the sense that, yeah, I mean, in the sense that it's your five senses. Anything that your company, your organization, your product, your courts, your parks, anything that hits the five senses defines your brand. We used to say, every touch point is a brand experience. That's true, but whether you walk into like McDonald's and that smell that hits you when you walk into McDonald's, that's part of their brand, right? When you pick up a Nike, Air Force, like that weight of that shoe and the feel of the leather, that's part of the brand, right? And I wonder actually if a brand isn't the culmination of those five senses and creates like that sixth sense. Like when you say Nike, that conjures up kind of like the sixth sense of like Nike. Like it's that word has meaning because of all these things we associate with that brand, right? And so I think your specific local Parks and Rec brand is, me walking my dog through the Presidio here, right? Or me walking by the tennis court and seeing the little sign, right? And I know what that sign says because there's no other signage around. Like my eye is drawn to those words, and I'm seeing those, and that's my brand experience with that tennis court, right? And with that Parks and Rec organization. Like it's all of that together. So again, I don't like treating brand as a thing that only happens on a billboard or a thing that only happens, in a mailer. It's really anything that you experience with that given entity. That is in my book, the brand.
So when you were at Nest or at Pest.com or anywhere, like when you guys decided like, hey, like how do we do like a in some ways like a brand audit or an understanding of what our brand is, um, and understood how customers feel during the brand. What I'm thinking about here is like, how can a Parks and Rec department understand what consumers are thinking about
Yeah.
their, like, how did you guys do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we ran a lot of surveys. We looked at the usage of our app, right? We did things like looked at Google Trends, which you can look at, online for free and type in a keyword and you'll see interest over time, or search queries, which translates into interest over time. We looked at all that data and came to certain conclusions, right? I think it kind of like gave us kind of like these broad kind of like, ooh, people are not aware of Nest because our Google Trends number was low, and so we had certain goals to hit a certain awareness level. And once we had enough money, we then hired folks to run awareness trackers and so forth. So data is important. DAUs, or daily average users, or MAUs, monthly average users, those are important data points, right? To show engagement for the Nest app, as it would be for the Rec app as well. So I think that's an important measure to keep an eye on, but I think it's really critical to keep in mind that behind all these numbers, right, there are people who are clicking or not clicking, who are incented to do something or disincented, engaged or not engaged. and to really understand why this individual is doing something or not doing something, you have to think about what you would do. And I think for the Parks and Rec especially, and it was true for Nest, like we are and should be consumers of our own products. We should experience our own brand out in the world. And I think that's an important addition to the Excel sheets and charts and graphs you get from aggregate data. You need to like put yourself into your customers or users or into those shoes, um and so we all had our thermostats in our homes. We all used the app, and when we hit a roadblock, when things got complicated or confusing, we would tell the person who's running the app UX, right, or the person who's designing the hardware for the thermostat. We tell them, this doesn't work. It's like it takes me 5 steps to do this thing when it should be like 2 steps max. So it's like as the saying goes at Google, like eat your own dog food. You like dog food it, so try it yourself.
And a conversation I was having with another like brand marketing person was this concept of like brand moments. Like in something like the Nest UX, I imagine there's a lot of things that are just like, hey, this just needs to work because people need to know the temperature of in their house. Um, how did you guys think of like, are there times where you can make people feel special or warm and fuzzy? And I'm starting to think about, hey, like, do Parks and Rec departments have similar opportunities?
The warm and fuzzy moments are moments when things just work, right? When you actually, even like a brand moment, it's interesting. A brand moment can be like an Easter eggy kind of thing. You can delight people, but you can't be too cute. Like if things get in the way of utility and just ease, because you're trying to artificially create this brand moment, people are onto you, and they don't like that. But if you actually have thought through a problem and solved it for them, then that's delightful. You've delighted them, right? So one thing, this is kind of like one of these famous kind of Nest stories, is that early on in the creation of the Nest packaging and the Nest installation process, because we were asking consumers to install a thermostat. That's kind of a crazy proposition. And so we made everything as simple as possible. We created these little speaker wire inserts where you don't have to like wrap the wire around the screw and put it in. You actually just like a speaker, like you push a button, you put the wire in, let the button go, and it's set, it's in there. So we try to do everything as easy as possible. And then we actually installed the thermostats in our homes, and everybody said super easy, super fast, takes like 30 minutes max. And then once we had all that set, we then had other people try it, non-nesters, right? And the data came back, and they were like 45 minutes here, hour and a half there, hour and 5 there. And we were like, why are they taking so long, right? And so we actually sent nesters to these homes, to new homes, because we need to try it with new people again. And they were watching people unbox the thermostat, look at the instructions, download the app, install the thing, and everything went fine until they actually needed a screwdriver. And we realized the reason why people were spending so much time installing the thermostats was not because it was the installation was so hard, like putting in the wire, but because they couldn't find their screwdriver. And so it took people surprisingly a large amount of time to look through the shelves and in their basements and so forth and garages to find a screwdriver. So what did we do? We designed a beautiful screwdriver with a Phillips and a flathead in it that you could change around. We put that in the packaging, and we delighted people. And not because we created a brand moment that created some Easter egg that was kind of funny or whatever. No, because we actually gave them something they needed, and I think those are the things that you that data won't show you. It took a long time, but that in and of itself didn't help us. We had to actually dig in and look at the individual, right? What was the individual doing or not doing, that became this obstacle that we then solved for and delighted people with.
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind for me is, I talked to a number of people in Parks and Rec departments that um, in the process of registration, it's summer camp registration,
Right.
there's a couple of, there's 10 people that didn't get the class they wanted, or it rained and people had to be rescheduled around things. And I
Right.
often find that registration teams will pour their heart and soul into getting everyone into the right class.
Right.
But after that's done, sometimes the message is just like a simple confirmation message that goes out. That's like, okay, you're booked, or like whatever that is. And there's a moment where like all of the passion that went into figuring this out for everyone didn't get put on a platform, and thus like there's like this like then that's kind of where I was going, right? It's like there's like these little moments that I feel like
Yeah.
just make them sparkle a bit.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. I think there are these um people forget kind of the all the steps. Like they do 90% of it or 95, right? And then that last button or the confirmation or what like you call that confirmation, like that gets left off. And it's another big learning from Nest, and I think that's kind of where a lot of people at Nest came from Apple, and they had that mindset where everything matters, right? It's not just the hardware, it's not just the app, it's everything. The unboxing, I remember, the Tony, one of the founders, when we were looking at packaging, he had 3 boxes in front of him and he picked one up, and he was trying to get the top off, and it was so well sealed that he picked it up and the thing wouldn't drop out, and so kind of got stuck, and so he had to like maneuver it and so forth. And then the second one he picked up, and it just there was no it just kind of like slid off too quick, and so he needed like that moment where the thing just dropped slowly, like the weight of it and the feel of it had to be just perfect, which meant the dimensions of the box had to be just perfect to make sure that that air vacuum when the bottom drops off is just a slow experience, suggesting quality and weight and so forth. And it's every little thing matters. Yeah, but everything little matters. Again, you want to live up to the amazing product that you have, right? So don't sell the park short. Like respect the park, respect your product, and do right by that precious thing that you have.
Okay, and so like let's actually just like move this into a conversation about parks and recreation. And so when we were talking about this question, I said, how should parks agencies think about their consumer? And you had crossed out consumer and said, how should I think about their people? And so yeah, just curious, like if you put your Parks and Rec department director hat on, how would you think about your people?
Yeah, I would try to really avoid thinking about them as this faceless aggregate of consumers or even data. I think you need to treat your citizens, your people as individuals, and know that everything that you do doesn't get consumed by the masses, but by many individuals. And on one hand, I think that should um, drive you to add more attention to detail and so forth to the various things you put out there. But I also imagine that it could be more delightful seeing your work in that sense. Like if you're making, TV dinners, right, at some factory to feed a faceless mob, right? You're not going to put a lot of love into the TV dinner that you're preparing, right? Whereas if you're preparing, if you're like a sushi chef and you're preparing the next kind of dish for the person who's sitting, across from you at the bar, you put a lot more attention to detail and love, frankly, and joy into this plate that you're creating. And I think that's how you should think about what you're doing every day. Is you're making this little 10-year-old happy, right? You're saving this mom who's a working mom, a ton of headache, and frankly giving her joy, letting her know that this 10-year-old is going to have a great day at camp today, and you're making that possible. And you're deciding which tools to put out in the world to have that, to create that day for that kid, and that's a great thing. That's why in that slide visual I crossed out consumer, because consumer is like this weird business term for this faceless mob, when in fact, no, we're dealing with individuals. We're dealing with people, and I just, it's important to keep that in mind as you go through your day, I think.
Yeah, and so like tactically, um, you know, how do you go from identifying who the people are to, I guess, thinking about the marketing, like how do you then build a few campaigns or, initiatives to go after these kind of fragmented people?
Yeah, it does help, to your point, it does help to create certain groups. Like if you're looking to build out summer camps, right, for 10-year-olds, then that's a certain, audience. You're talking to parents, and you're selling them a day, right, for your kid that's both safe and joyful. Whereas if you're talking to, let's say, retirees for pickleball games, that's a different audience. And you want to make sure that there's a broad kind of brand, if you will, that is accepting of all these ages and all of these groups and so forth, right? But then you also have to zero in on a conversation with that mom of the 10-year-old, or with that 68-year-old retiree who wants to meet her friends out for a game of pickleball, or needs an instructor, right, to help her out because she's playing her neighbor next week, and she wants to finally kick some ass. Like you want to tailor the marketing, but again, it's more like you just want to have a conversation with that respective person, whether it's that mom or the retiree, that is meaningful and relevant to that person. And then again, from a channel standpoint or media standpoint, you can do that on social, or more efficiently, you can do that in an app like Rec, where you can actually, where the demographics of that audience, and you can zero in and tailor that message.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so, a follow-up to this is like, and I think this goes into our next question, which is, I was having a conversation at the Arizona Parks and Rec Association about marketing with a Parks and Rec director, and they said, we really encourage marketing. We encourage people hitting social media. We designed a summer campaign. They thought about the color of the graphics and the intention of what they're doing. But then they said, and that tied to their activity guide, and they said, like, we don't know if it's working. Like, how can you tell if your marketing is working?
I mean, that depends on what your goals are, right? I mean, if let's say your goals are, I want to increase the number of people that are on our courts, right? And I want to increase so that's a hard metric, right? And then I want to increase the fun they're having on the courts. That's more of a soft metric. And so you have to think about, how am I going to measure that, right? I mean, the hard data of like people on the courts, you could have somebody sit there with a notepad and jot that down. Or you could have an app like Rec that actually captures, how many people are actively, booking courts and booking instructors and so forth. And then the fun factor, Yeah, that's you need to go out there and ask people, or create surveys for that. Um, and I think that's a longer term kind of like 6 month, 12 month, thing. Um, you can also measure engagement and just kind of comments. So you can scrub Reddit or scrub social for comments, right? As you post your posts on Instagram, read the comments. What are people saying? Are they frustrated, right? Are they happy? I mean, you can quantify that. You can count. You need that. There's software that scrubs this stuff for positive or negative mentions. Sentiment analysis, whatever. You can do all those things, but you need to set it up to make sure you're tracking those things. Um, the other thing I'd say about marketing when we're talking about classic, marketing campaigns and so forth, you need to invest the time, effort, sometimes money to hit a minimum threshold. So at Nest, we had many debates about, do we run TV or not? And TV is expensive, and for a startup, that's a big investment, right? And we tried television in certain markets. My fear was always, we don't have enough, we're not spending enough money to hit a minimum threshold. If you run a spot, right, that on television, that makes you maybe feel like, ooh, we've made it, we're running a spot on TV. But if somebody sees that spot once, nothing will happen. You will not move a needle. You have to really, when you look at television today, the major advertisers are, billion-dollar companies that just run ads over, and like Geico, like they've figured out, from an investment standpoint, if I invest $1 billion, I'm going to make 1.5. So they just keep running ads because they know that there's positive ROI on that investment. But they're running a lot of ads.
Yeah, yeah. And so,
So back to Parks and Rec. Sorry, but back to Parks and Rec. So uh, if whether or not a campaign is working, make sure you are defining what working means. You've set up a way to track that, whether it's whatever it's users or sentiment or whatever, and you're getting a proper read on that. And then lastly, make sure your campaign is actually, significant enough to get registered. There's this minimum threshold of like, what we used to call reach and frequency. You're reaching enough people and hitting them over the head. Like, again, I'm using all these like bad terms, but you're hitting them over the head multiple
totally.
times.
Yeah, you can't just sprinkle a bunch of stuff in different places.
Yeah, you can't just have a post on Instagram once a week and think that's a campaign. I would imagine.
Absolutely. And so, okay, so let's say the city of Pawnee, Indiana gets really lucky. They have half of a marketing resource available to them because Parks and Rec departments are incredibly under-resourced, and it
Yeah.
happens to be Anton. And so, Anton, you're starting your job. It's day one. What's the no-brainer set of things that you say, okay, in this new environment where I don't have the money to run TV campaigns, like what am I just gonna
I
start
need
getting?
this is, self-serving in a way, but I need a force multiplier, right? So I would get rec, right? Because I know
Yeah,
apps, but I'm serious. It's like apps make my job easier, or an app like rec. I'll say an app like that. Apps make my job easier or my team's job easier because they actually solve a lot of the day-to-day calendaring, scheduling headaches, right? It takes that off my plate, right? And what I get in return is happier folks and a media platform, right? Which is free, right? So I can put information onto the app. I can notify people if they've turned on the notifications for rec. That's one thing I would champion is like, we got to get an app, right? So that we can actually communicate with people who are interested in us. I mean, that's a no-brainer, right? The second thing is and this goes back to my New York City Times Square example versus the one little, signage, that little sign in the Presidio here in San Francisco. I have an entire park with billboard space. Right now, I don't want to plaster the park full of my own billboards. That doesn't make any sense. But in choice areas, for opportune moments of valuable information sharing, right? I think it's fair for me to put a sign on the tennis court to let people know something, right? And that moment can be helpful, it can be educational, it can even be delightful, right? And those are the things I would use. I would do Instagram. I would post once a day, 4 times a week. I would post beauty shots of my park. I mean, that's like, again, a no-brainer. But really, the from a utility, information sharing, getting people out standpoint, I would champion, as this halftime, marketing person, I would champion an app like Rec.
Yeah, and I guess like I'm honored and thank you. But like rec aside, like I think what you're getting at is what does the app enable you to do? It's like be more, are you trying to become more personalized, more in their pocket? Like what are the threads that whether or not someone is choosing to switch platforms, like what should they be looking to do?
Oh, you said switching platforms? What do you mean?
Like whether or not they're kind of like adopting a full new app, like what are the underlying things that you're trying to get at? Like what should people be trying to do? Is it make their messaging more personalized? Is it to be able to create like notifications? Like what are like the exciting things an app enables?
Well, first off, utility, right? I mean, I don't look at my Uber app to get news or to, like it's first and foremost, I need a ride, right? And so an app like Rec, first and foremost, should be, I want to go out and play, or I want to find people to play with, or I need an instructor, or, I've got, an hour. I don't want to wait around on a court for it to open up. I need to know that I have this hour to play, so I need the app. I mean, it's almost like not a nice to have, but a must have. You know what I mean? And once the app is once I find an app that delivers that to my folks, then I can think about, well, okay, now what does the app let me do in addition to the core utility that I need to do? Just like the thermostat app, right? Like I need to be able to turn my thermostat up and down, right? Now, then there are other things that the app can do, but the utility is core. I can use the app to tell all the Nest customers, hey, we've got a new Nest coming, or hey, now we have smoke alarms, right? And I can use the app to market the new smoke alarm, which we never did because it didn't feel right. But Google does it all the time. But in this case, I think it's different because what you're saying is, here's the app that you use 3 times a week to book that pickleball court. By the way, we're having a 5K turkey trot. Come out and join us. That's lovely. That's not, you're not selling me anything. You're just telling me about a cool event.
Yeah, I actually am like hearing what you say, and I'm like thinking about it as like find high frequency opportunities to provide utility to your residents.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like thinking about, okay, yeah, there's quarterly registration, but in between every season, it's like, how do we build a digital relationship with our residents?
Yeah, and I wouldn't even call it a digital relationship. I would just call it a relationship. Whatever the form of the media is doesn't really matter. It's like you are built, again, it's one to one, not one to many in that sense. And you have to think about it that way. You're not dealing with, again, this faceless mob. You're dealing with your neighbors, or your neighbor, frankly.
Cool. Well, okay, we're coming up towards the end of time. If anyone has any questions for Anton, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. Um, I'll ask a couple, or I'll start with one kind of like just open-ended one to get going. But when we just step back from marketing and think more about like technology trends and technology trends that are impacting everyone's daily lives, um, I know you're also a part-time investor, and so like what trends excite you? Um, and whether or not they may or may not apply to recreation long term.
What trends excite me? I think in this, again, to use a park and rec kind of hopefully related thing, I just love the ease and utility of our day and age, in its most positive sense. Like if the goal is to get people out and play, technology now allows us, let's say I want to, you know, play a game of pickleball, and I go into my rec app and I say, anybody up for a game of pickleball? And then on the other side of the fence, like somebody sees that notification because they've said, I'm available or I'm open for an invite. And I can just like within an hour, go out and play pickleball with one of my neighbors ad hoc, you know. It's fantastic. I don't know. I don't know. I think that's technology just allows us to do so many cool things. I mean, even like pre and post cell phones. I remember I had a cell phone new in my pocket. Is like this cool new device. I didn't really know what it would do. And I was walking down the street and suddenly I got a call from a buddy of mine, and they say, "Hey, we're at so and so having drinks after work." And I did a 180 and turned around to go to that bar. And I realized, well, in the past, I would have just walked home, checked my answering machine, and then decided, nah, it's too late. I'm staying in. But the cell phone changed my day. and then subsequently, all of our lives. And I think the same is true for, apps like Rec, others, I'm sure there are others, that change the game, literally and figuratively, because I can now play that game ad hoc suddenly, out of the blue, I get an invite. So I think technology just has the ability to change things, in this case for the better, making us all more active and happier, which I think is the goal of a Park and Recs organization, right? Isn't that really? I mean, like fundamentally, you want to get people out more active, more social, resulting in healthier, happier, people, I think.
Totally. And then I guess my other question is just a bit more tactical, and it's if you put yourself back in the shoes of Anton that works part-time at Pawnee, if there's like, I know you mentioned a few tools as you were talking, for everywhere from Google Trends to other data tools. Like if there was one data tool you would encourage a Parks and Rec department to start using right away, or a trend to start tracking, what would that like tool be?
Apart from Rec itself.
Yeah, that's like more kind of like I guess in the like marketing,
Well, and I'm not kidding, because Raju, I think Rec is going to give you the most valuable, relevant, data that you can get. I mean, if you're trying to figure out what your people are doing in your park, you're not going to get that from anything other than Rec, right? I mean, just honestly, like Google Trends is not going to, maybe sure, how many people search for, the
yeah,
Arizona Parks and Rec website?
yeah,
Okay, but that's not
yeah, right. And so what you're saying is like it's like whatever your digital platform is, where people are booking, using, engaging,
right.
that thing needs to be more powerful. Like that thing needs to be giving you the data, the ability to action that data.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's a good starting point. And I think like that's like a good follow-up for future webinars, and really understanding like how do you design a platform that works, or like kind of like make that platform more powerful.
Yeah, and I mean, in your case, since you're the one selling rec, right? Your product, you know, is what you're selling. So and you're doing this, you know, talk to the people who are going to use this thing day in, day out. How do you make lives easier for them? How are you going to delight them? You know, each individual one by one, you know, and then from a data aggregation and presenting standpoint, what do you serve up? What kind of charts and graphs? It's DAUs, you know, MAUs. You know, what are their KPIs? What are the Parks and Recs team's KPIs, and how do you serve that up to have them be, you know, be better?
Yeah, we're excited. Uh, cool. Well, I think we can wrap here. Anton, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me. I love what you do. I love what your customers, you know, provide. Big fan.
Awesome. Thank you. We will share a recording and some snippets from some of the biggest nuggets of wisdom that Anton shared. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.